It is important now than ever before that the Left Democratic Front government in Kerala gets another term in office. It is important because the track record of the Left Democratic Front government begins with the first ever democratically elected communist ministry in the world in 1957, the MS Namboodiripad ministry, which was torpedoed after 2 years in 1959 by the then Congress government in Delhi. Today we see resonances, echoes of the same kind of phenomenon, the so-called Vimojana Samaram, or liberation struggle, that displaced the legitimately elected VMS government in Kerala. We see the same kind of combination, the stirrings of forces, where obscuranted forces join hands with sections of the media, sections of society, to try and arbitrarily displace a government which has gone down well with the people and which continues to have the trust and the mandate of the people. It is important that we have another term of the LDF in office because of the track record of achievements of the LDF whenever it was in power. It is a long-term visionary plan. Whether you take 1987, when the idea of decentralization began, and the district councils, unfortunately, that were mooted then were sabotaged and removed by the subsequent Congress government, or in 1996, when the idea of decentralization was deepened with the People's Planning Program, which became indeed a model for the entire country. Up until now, the current Pinarayi Vijayan government, which against great odds of natural calamities, of disasters, has put in such a sterling performance of achievement. Take the cyclone Oki in 2017. It combated the Nipah virus, the tremendous floods, the unprecedented floods that Kerala witnessed and experienced and suffered under. And then in 2019, the COVID-19, the pandemic that we are all still undergoing and still suffering from. Against all this, it was literally a troubleshooting term in office of managing natural disasters, and yet there was a story of development, of consistent, quiet development, which comprises the highlights of which are known to all of us. We know that the Kit Foods program, which was there throughout the lockdown, which gave every ration card holder a sumptuous meal, a kit which is a food kit of sumptuous meal, which talked about the program which enabled 2,50,684, if my number is correct, households for the shelterless, providing shelter for the homeless, which talked about, not just talked about, actually achieved raising the social welfare pension from 600 rupees to thrice that, almost 1,600 rupees. And in the current manifesto, the government, the LDF manifesto, the promise is to increase that further to 2,500 rupees, which brought in radical developments in terms of education, of health, of infrastructure, of growth. 45,000 high-tech schools, whereby we saw a reverse flow of students moving from private schools to public schools. What is called the KIIFB, or the KIFB program in common parlance in Malayalam, which is the Kerala Infrastructure Investment Development Fund, which actually provided over the 5-year term for investments up to 60,000 crore rupees in key areas of development of infrastructure. All these were achievements against the big odds that we spoke about: the floods, Nipah, Oki cyclone, and the COVID-19. Contrast this with what was happening in the rest of the country, particularly by policies, by the kind of, shall we say, whimsical policies of the central government. The lockdown, initiated with little thought, almost like a whimsical measure, which put hundreds of millions of people on the streets. The biggest mass migration of people in India since partition, where people were uprooted, they were rendered jobless, they were rendered without any livelihoods. In fact, the Pew Center of Research, the prestigious Pew Center of Research, analysis has just come out, which points out that the poverty rate, those in the poverty line, and that's defined as those earning less than 150 rupees a day, has doubled during this lockdown period in India. We are contributing 60% to the increase in poverty world over, because of the COVID-19 situation. So it's a dismal performance there. As against that, Kerala was an oasis of development, of relative prosperity, of combating Nipah and COVID, the endemic Nipah and the pandemic COVID-19 in an exemplary manner, so much so that it became a case study internationally, spoken about, written about, reported across the world. So this is the envious record of the Pinarayi Vijayan government in the last 5 years. And we need to repeat it, not just for the sake of Kerala, which is why I say it is important more than ever before for us to have another term of this LDF government in office, because of the combination, the conjuncture of forces that we are struggling with, which threatens the very idea of India, the very idea of democracy, the very constitution that is dear to us, that safeguards our sovereignty as independent people. Kerala has stood in the forefront to combat the invasion, the literal erosion of the constitutional values that are dear to us. Never in independent India have we faced such a circumstance, barring that aberration, that dark period of 2 years perhaps, 1975 to 77 of the emergency. And therefore it is that we need to support, we need to be conscious of the need for another term of the left government in Kerala, because Kerala is important, because that government is important not just for Kerala and for Malayalis in Kerala, not just for the voters who bring that government to power, but as an example, as a reference of sanity, of hope for the future for the rest of India. Look at the consistent erosion of the constitution that has taken place over the last 5 years because of the central government. Look at what the idea of separation of powers in our constitution has literally been upended, has literally been made a mockery of. The executive powers have been arrogated. There's a personality cult that is running loose, running rampant. The legislature has been literally sidelined, has become at the beck and call of the executive in some ways. Even the judiciary looks miffed and looks unable, looks weak. The judicial process looks unable to tackle the situation where the constitution is being threatened. And the fourth estate, or the fourth pillar of the media, has been literally co-opted by the government in power. And many of them have willingly laid themselves prostrate before the powers that be, which is against the very ethics of journalism, of free media in the country. So all the four pillars of democracy stand threatened. You see, as we speak, they are bringing a bill in the Lok Sabha to try and give more powers to the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. It's really to kind of subvert the democratically elected government that is there in power, the Kejriwal government in Delhi. As we speak, various moves which question the citizenship of people of this country, which affects the dignity of the people of this country, which goes against Article 21, which speaks about personal liberty and dignity of every Indian citizen, has been mooted. The CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, against which there has been uproar in the country, but the central government is determined to brazen it out. Kerala is among the states, the few states, a handful of 4 or 5 states, where a resolution has been passed in the assembly against the CAA. Whereas a resolution has been passed against the dark laws, the farm laws, against which people are still sitting out there, suffering the elements from the winter onwards, the farmers, against these black laws. So, and the process of, as we said, the way people are rendered homeless, jobless because of the sudden lockdown that was imposed. All of this while the legacy of a ill thought of, almost a quixotic demonetization move which achieved nothing and just threw the economy into further disarray. So this is why the principles of federalism, which are very important, which are an important part of the constitution, have to be reinforced, and Kerala has been in the forefront of doing that, in terms of providing an alternative vision and providing a different kind of possibility before the people. In the financial sector, in the economic sector, in the social sector. And therefore it is that we need the government of Kerala to continue as an example for the next 5 years as well. Let me elaborate a bit on the threats that face us. constitutionally. As far as Kerala is concerned, the benefits of the LDF government are rather well known. And why is it that it is important for the LDF to get another term? Because the opposition Congress, which normally in a democracy would have a legitimate role, is now in a peculiar situation where it is seen as a B team of the BJP, which has really no locus standi or any roots in Kerala yet. But it will use the Congress to try and pretend that it has a following in the people. Because the Congress, which even as I speak in Bengal, which is a variant of the Congress at Tamil Nadu Manila, the TMC in Bengal, the Mamata Banerjee's TMC in Bengal, she herself says the BJP there comprises of Mir Jafars who have left the TMC. It's a version of that is going to happen in Kerala. There's a perverse argument doing the rounds in Kerala that it's important for the Congress to come to power, otherwise the Congress will cease to exist as a party because all of them might defect to the BJP. That's all the more reason why you can't trust them with another term in office. And therefore, by a process of elimination, by a process of respecting and looking at the track record of what the LDF has done in this last 5 years, by a process of what the LDF means to the rest of the country, what it means to democracy, what it means to our constitutional values, what it means to the future of India, to the idea of India, it's important to bring the LDF back for another term. We are today living in very, very precarious times where electoral politics have become very dangerous in the sense that they tend to subvert the long-tested and the long-respected and long-cherished and nourished values of democracy that have by and large been respected until now. We have got into a pattern now, which is a new pattern, where just before elections, the central government unleashes a number of central agencies like the CBI, like the Enforcement Directorate, like the Income Tax, and of course any other other central agencies whose job is to act like road rollers. They just road roller and make the path clear by snuffing out all opposition voices and try and make a congenial kind of atmospherics, a situation for the party in power and center to also come to power in the state. Very often they are still not able to do that. They lose an election and yet come to power because of post-election shall we say, skullduggery and political legerdemain and all kinds of dirty tricks departments, activities that we see happening. This has happened in state after state after state. And therefore, it's important for the LDF government, the LDF ministry, to come back to power, not just with a comfortable majority, but with a overwhelming majority, in my opinion, because they need the strength to continue to be combative. They need the strength to continue to resist the systematic offensive that is taking place. They mount a defense against a systematic offensive that is taking place on the people of India, on their constitutional values, on their self-respect, on their right to live a peaceful life. Kerala has been exemplary in that sense, right from the days of the MS ministry, if you like, where different communities, religious communities, have lived together in harmony. And you can see the conscious attempts to disturb that, to polarize people on the lines of their religion, on lines of their caste, on lines of their creed, because that kind of amity doesn't allow entry for vociferous forces, by forces which have no interest in such a cohesive, harmonious existence of a people, because that does not allow them entry into that electoral fray. And therefore, in Kerala, what you will find is the secularism. If you say secularism today in India, the only example perhaps, or the best example, is Kerala. Because secularism is there, not just worn on our sleeves as a matter of tokenism, it is there in the heart of every Malayali, of every Keralite voter. Secularism is something that we take for granted. It's something you grow up with. It's not something that you need to keep reminding yourself often about. At a time when there are important people, including, say, the Chief Minister of UP recently, who say secularism is something which is strange to our ethos. That seems to be the essence of what he's saying. They would rather do away with secularism, which is an important cornerstone of our Constitution. It's one of the basic features of our Constitution. So there are attempts to attack the basic features of our constitution, attempts to attack the schema of separation of powers, whereby the executive, the legislature, the judiciary and the fourth estate are in a state of checks and balances against one another, so that any one of them does not run away with the ball and make India a kind of autocracy. Unfortunately, we are already being called an electoral autocracy by international bodies. We are already being seen as a lesser democracy. Recently, the Freedom House rated India as a lesser democracy, as not a full democracy. This is an insult to us. It is an international embarrassment to us. And who brings this about? You can't blame these agencies for saying what they are. There is no conspiracy there. They are not pro-left conspiratorial bodies who are trying to embarrass the BJP government at the center. If anything, there's more in common between the neoliberal values and policies of the government at the center and what many of these agencies represent. They have no love lost. They have little love lost for they have no love at all for any leftist combination of forces. And yet, they are forced to recognize the fact that there has been a kind of degrading of democracy in India. And this is therefore the situation that we are faced with. And the only way therefore to fight the situation is to reaffirm our belief in the constitutional values, to fight for those values, and we need a political leadership that will do that for us. And I can see no better state today in India than Kerala to lead that process. Kerala has already shown that willingness, not in terms of organizing meetings between finance ministers of other states who are like-minded, who also see the threat of this erosion on the federal principles of our constitution, not just in terms of the way the GST regime has played out, but also in terms of the way the stepmotherly treatment given to states, particularly states which are opposed to the policies that the ruling parties stand for. The narrow, sectarian, divisive, polarizing policies of the BJP. And the BJP does this by creating, by muddying the waters. A non-issue is blown all out of proportion as if there is a threat to the Hindus in Kerala. And the paradox of it is this from a party which has nothing really to do with Hinduism. Hindutva, which they espouse, has nothing to do with Hinduism. Hindutva is a paper cut out poster of which is an insult to the profundity, insult to the philosophy, insult to the grand idea of Hinduism, the inclusive idea of Hinduism, the philosophical moorings of Hinduism. So, and it's not a surprise that a party behind whose inspiration is the RSS will do this, has to use Hindutva rather than Hinduism, because the founder of the RSS, Hedgewar, and the proponent of Hindutva, if you like, Savarkar, were both acknowledged atheists. They didn't even believe in God. What kind of religion, in the true sense, in the profound sense, can you expect from a philosophy, from a movement, from an ideology that is inspired by this organization? And therefore it is that this is a smokescreen. It's an alibi. It's a mockery of the idea of religion. And they think people of Kerala are fooled if you think Hinduism is in danger. A majoritarian religion which is living in coexistence with other religions, which has had no problem so far, or well until recently, where you polarize the communities on identity on the lines of their religious identities, where identity politics is played in its most vicious and poisonous sense, and you expect a literate state like Kerala. Total literacy in India, in Kerala, was achieved again under an LDF government, under a communist government in the 87, I think, second INR government. People to fall for this? People do not fall for this. People not only do not fall for this, people see that this is the party, this is the combination that can safeguard their self-respect. The Malayali sentiment, the Malayali ego, the Malayali dignity has been insulted by the kind of things that have been unleashed in Kerala in recent days, or recent weeks, or recent months. And that has to be avenged in the process of this election by re-electing the LDF to power. Otherwise, we will be answerable to history. we will be answerable to history. Just as Indira Gandhi continues to be answerable to history because of the emergency, I think we are going through an undeclared emergency now, for which the proponents of it, those responsible for it, will be answerable to history for posterity in the history of independent India. Several years back, in the immediate aftermath of the emergency, now that we speak about the emergency, Justice Chandrachud, not the current justice in the Supreme Court, but his father, I believe, had made this wonderful analogy. He spoke about 3 articles in the Constitution becoming the golden triangle which protects our rights, safeguards all that we aspire for, all that we stand for as a nation, as a sovereign and independent republic. And those 3 articles in the Constitution are Article 14, which speaks about equality for everyone under the law, Article 19, particularly Article 19(1)(a) and (g), which speak about freedom of speech and expression and freedom to practice any profession, under which the rights of the press are derived, and Article 21, which speaks about the right to life and personal dignity. He said these are the 3 articles which form the kind of golden triangle, if you will, which are the cornerstones of our Constitution. And he referred that protecting these, he alluded to the fact that protecting these 3 articles would indeed make India, a kind of a place that Rabindranath Tagore aspired to when he spoke about where the mind is without fear, in that wonderful poem which continues to be our aspirational idea of India. And paradoxically, because of the way the Constitution is being treated, because of the shabby way in which the constitutional principles are being treated, today we are in a situation where if you exercise your right as a citizen under Article 14 or 19 in the Indian Constitution, you forfeit your right under Article 21. Article 14 speaks about the right to equality under law, 19 about the right to speech and expression. But if you try to exercise your right to free speech and expression, somebody comes after you. The street, there's a lynch mob mentality, as many important people, Dabolkar, Pensare, have seen. Someone will come after you on a motorbike with a gun and shoot you down when you're on your morning walk or unsuspectingly having your morning tea at home. So you try to exercise your right of freedom of speech and expression under Article 19, you forfeit your right to life and dignity under Article 21. This is how they have made a mockery of the Constitution, of the fundamental rights of the Constitution. And therefore, I will appeal to all of you to think through the important issues that face us today at this very precarious conjuncture in our history as an independent nation. We are living in unprecedented times, facing unprecedented threats to our life and dignity, and we need the example, we need the determination and willpower that has been demonstrated by a state like Kerala, by a government like the LDF, which has led that state over the last 5 years, to continue to do so in the very, very perilous, precarious and crucial days and months and years ahead. And therefore, I will conclude by reiterating what I said at the outset, that it is important now than ever before that the LDF government has another term in office. Because, as Justice Chandrachud I referred to in the aftermath of the emergency, to protect our Constitution, to realize the wonderful ideal of Rabindranath Tagore of an aspirational nation. I quote Tagore to end this brief appeal: where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where the tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom. My Father, let my country awake, And God's own country is the best approximation to that ideal.